Hello everyone, I'm Professor Geek. Welcome back to the channel, and welcome to another inspirational albums video. I wanted to have something in between these videos, another topic or whatever, but I'm just really into talking about this right now, so that's the video you're gonna get. Gonna talk today about Aerosmith. Aerosmith's a big band for me. I mentioned in these videos that I did in high school started playing bass and throughout my teens and early 20s, was playing bass in a lot of different bands and whatnot. So music was a big thing for me. But even before I really got into playing music, music was just, that was, I liked stories, I liked Batman, I liked comic books and stuff like that. But music too was a huge deal for me growing up. And for a lot of my friends it was as well, in a way that I just don't see it a thing for younger generations anymore. And it's really mind-boggling. Rick Beato did a video on that, kind of like, what is this? Kids used to have bands that they loved and whatnot, and they kind of, like identified with, and it's sort of the same thing with fandom, But Aerosmith was that for me. They're really the first band that really became my band. It was in elementary school, 4th or 5th grade, when Pump came out. I remember watching the Love in an Elevator video on MTV when they still played videos and be like, this is amazing, and really got into them. I remember, man, they helped me through middle school, right? The horrible time in middle school. Aerosmith, when the Get a Grip album came out, I had a shirt with the Get a Grip album cover on it, wore everywhere. Wouldn't matter, hot summer, amusement parks, didn't matter, wore that everywhere, that black shirt. And of course, when I did start playing bass, I realized that all that time listening to Aerosmith, Tom Hamilton had a huge influence on me. Tom Hamilton is hands down one of the best rock and roll bass players out there. He's just amazing. The kind of bass playing that I really like, that's integrated, harmonies, just awesome. Anyway. But I'm going to pick an album now for this Inspirational Albums series. This is in no way trying to say this is their best album. That's an argument that people can have and go on and on and on. I'm saying it's definitely, it's hard pressed to, again, pick a favorite Aerosmith album, but it's there, it's in the running. And it's the album that I'm going to choose as the one I'm drawing inspiration from today, because it's an important one. And the album I'm going to talk about, of course, is Permanent Vacation. The album came out in 1987, and it really was their comeback album. They'd had a long history, of course. They'd been around in the 70s and had a huge career already. They were, really a major rock band in the 70s, and if you know anything about their history, of course, there was a lot of substance abuse. Joe Perry and Brad Whitford had left the band for a time, pursuing their own projects, and it looked like the days were over for Aerosmith. It really did. I mean, they brought in replacements and the band kept going, but things were going downhill. Music was changing. You had the 80s, you had new wave, you had hair metal. Of course, all the hair metal bands owed such a debt to the bands like Aerosmith from the 70s and whatnot. But, what were they going to do? Were they going to hang it up and retire? Were they going to keep going or whatever? You can read a lot about this wonderful story in Joe Perry's autobiography, Rocks. Joey Kramer also wrote a great autobiography about his time and in the band and whatnot. I think Steven Tyler's written one now as well. But Rocks is great. I'm starting Joey Kramer's, which is really great as well. Joey Kramer, excellent, excellent drummer. I'll talk about him more later in another video as well. But great story of that. Overcoming substance abuse, Joe Perry himself overcoming like bankruptcy and things like that. Really just piecing their lives back together after just doing the whole rock and roll star thing. The Spinal Tap story, quintessential. When Perry and Whitford did come back into the band, they put out an album kind of quickly, I think, Done with Mirrors, which is, I still think that's a good album. I mean, the song Sheila is probably amazing, one of the most amazing songs from that album. But, you could tell listening to the album, they were still trying to find their groove. One of the songs they used had been a song that Joe Perry was going to use for his own Joe Perry project and stuff. So, they were still kind of finding their groove a little bit. And how were they going to exist? How was Aerosmith going to exist in the 80s now, 87? What were they going to be? And in this new era with this new music, they decided to go ahead and work with a songwriter. Desmond Child is one of the songwriters they worked with. The great Desmond Child. I mean, if you like music of this era, and he probably don't realize that he co-wrote a lot of your favorite songs. I mean, he's an amazing songwriter. But the thing about Desmond Child is he was one of the songwriters for hire. He didn't come in and write songs for somebody who couldn't write songs for themselves. He wrote songs along with bands like Bon Jovi, Aerosmith, all these different bands, Kiss and whatnot. and his role as a songwriter was to really help them bring out what was so unique about them, and bring a nice pop sound, to the not pop, but what was popular in the day, just really bring it out. He's a great songwriter. They agreed to work with him. Joe Perry talks about in his book how, of course, the songwriting team of Perry and Tyler is a wonderful songwriting team. Tyler would take a little while with the lyrics, and then with all the things that were going on, though it could be a little hard to make it happen. So they agreed to work with another songwriter. A lot of bands wouldn't allow their ego to let them do that. They agreed to try out some new sounds, but they didn't sell out. They didn't just end up trying to do a new sound. They didn't just try to end up making Aerosmith a hair metal band, the thing that they had influenced. They didn't go the new wave route or whatever. They didn't change who they were, which was wonderful. They really did get in touch with their roots in some ways. There's a wonderful track, a cover of I'm Down from the Beatles on here that's rocking. Oh, it's so great. This album, of course, if you know anything about Aerosmith, gave you the hits Ragdoll, Dude Looks Like a Lady, Angel, all that kind of stuff. The song that I'm going to put in the description down there, I'll link it up here too as well, is one of my favorite songs from actually I'll link two songs that they didn't make it as hits, but two of my favorite Aerosmith songs hands down is Magic Touch. What a wonderful song. Magic Touch, once it kind of fades in, you just feel the energy of Aerosmith. That's the thing. I mean, they crank those amps up loud, and even though they're blues bass, it's so loud, it's just rocking. That's what Tom Hamilton said about their blues album, what's called Honkin' on Bobo, they did, towards the end of their career. And it was just an album of blues covers, and he said, yeah, this is supposed to be our blues album, but the amps are up way too loud. This is rock, as is what they do. And Magic Touch, you can just sense that. The song just flows in, and it driving bass and everything. It's really great. Cimaraya is the other one that I'll link to, which is another great one. But the album's got so many great things on it. They get in touch with their blues roots, stuff like Hangman Jury. They try some new things. There's this little instrumental at the end of the album called The Movie, which is like as though they were writing a movie score or soundtrack. It's really fascinating. It's fun to hear. And, bands, when they try to make a comeback, it would have been easy for Aerosmith to get discouraged. They got back together. They tried to make a comeback with Done With Mirrors, but it didn't really happen. They're seeing all these other bands on the scene now that are flourishing because of Aerosmith's influence. Aerosmith laid the base. A lot of those bands did for the hair rock kind of stuff that was so great in the 80s. So what were they going to do? They kept at it though. They said, let's go ahead and adapt, but not lose who we are. Let's go ahead and work with this or that songwriter. Let's go ahead and do that, but stay true to who we are at the same time. And that's just what I so love about Aerosmith. You see that evolution. This little era right here, it's really kind of between Permanent Vacation and I would say Nine Lives, those albums. Of course, they did great stuff after that as well and before it. But this era right here is kind of like a special little era for me anyway, for their music. And you see that constantly. One album came later, Just Push Play. There's just some good stuff on that album. But, they were trying, the producers and everything. Joe Perry talks about it in his book too, how, there were some powers that be which were trying to push that album a little too much like pop or whatever. Still had some good stuff on it, but they didn't let that ruin them. They constantly came back and just remained true to who they were. And you've got great albums like Songs from Another Dimension or Music from Another Dimension, the Honkin' on Bobo blues album as well. They kept going. They're doing great stuff. They are still doing stuff now, not recording any new stuff, as I know. They tour, of course. Steven Tyler's into a rehab for some painkillers as the time I released this. They were supposed to do a residency in Vegas. So they had their ups and downs. At this point, though, they had cleaned themselves up. They were off the drugs. They were just about making music. Let's stick to what matters. Joe Perry himself had come through a pretty horrible marriage and was at a good place in his new relationship, new marriage and whatnot. A lot of the band members had been through similar things like that. And they just were never afraid to keep pressing on and reinventing themselves and being true to who they were as artists, which was, musicians and that kind of great sound that they had. And you can go back and listen to their first album, Aerosmith Rocks. You can listen to, or Aerosmith was the first album, but you can listen to those early albums. You can listen to these. You can listen to the most recent ones they did. Yeah, you can tell how they've evolved a little bit in sound, but still very much, it's just simply Aerosmith. It's wonderful. They were such a phenomenon. The last thing I'll show, just because I'm just proud of it and like to show it off. But of course, they did those hard rock comics, some versions of Aerosmith's story, the unauthorized ones. This one, though, this is a Valiant comic, which they actually licensed Aerosmith with. It's a little collector's edition for me. Shadow Man, if you remember, was a Valiant comic book hero. He's like a saxophone player, by day or whatever. But they had a guest appearance in this, which is pretty fun. This is during the Get a Grip album tour area and everything like that. But you got all the band members kind of, going through and doing the heroics. There you got Taylor and Kramer and Ty Perry and all that stuff. So good stuff. They can't, I don't want to say they're a household name like like the Beatles or anything necessarily, but everybody knows Aerosmith. You know that sound. In the 80s or 70s when they first came out, they were criticized for being too much like Rolling Stones or Zeppelin, but people didn't realize they created this wonderful sound that was in between something like Rolling Stones and Zeppelin. And they had this own wholesome kind of American just rock, just answer to that British invasion that was just such an amazing thing, that blues bass, it really is a quintessential American rock band. It really is. So that's my inspirational album. Check out Permanent Vacation if you haven't heard it yet. A really great example of don't be afraid to reinvent yourself, staying true to who you are, but trying new things that don't make you contradict who you are and betray that. So good stuff. Good album. I recommend it. You can check out the links below or above or whatever. And I'll be back next with another pretty sweet album that I draw a lot of inspiration from as well. So until next time, keep digging in deeper into the heroic stories and music you love best. Thanks for watching.